providing the venue in the first place, and so many volunteers for making this possible tonight. You'll find copies of the League's 2017 What's on the Ballot Facts for Voters on your chairs or on the table or in the hall. And the voters' guides are available online at 411, the vote 411. We also have volunteers available there to assist you with questions on voter registration and to give you any additional materials you may need. So here's the format. Every candidate on the ballot was invited to participate. Candidates who could not appear were allowed to send a substitute to read a statement in their place. Substitutes were not allowed to answer questions. 3 candidates chose to appear in person, 1 chose not to attend, nor to send a representative. I'd like to introduce our 2 timers, Lisa May and Sydney Johnson. I'll introduce each candidate who will make a 2-minute opening remark, and that candidate will receive a 30-second, 15-second, and stop alert. Candidates are seated in the order in which they will appear on the ballot. After the first question, I'll rotate the order so that everyone has an opportunity to be the first. A reminder for selecting questions, if you'd like to add some. Volunteers collect and the sorters will then sort them and get them to me. Please hold your applause till the end, please. You'll have an opportunity, I guarantee you to clap at the end. We have allowed 30 minutes at the end for you to do a meet and greet with the candidates. Perhaps your answer needs to be expanded, perhaps your question wasn't asked. That's your opportunity. You won't leave tonight without a question answered. And the candidates have agreed to these rules. Any questions? Yes, is that a hand? Yes.
What happened to the questions we submitted online? Thank you.
Do you have copies?
You have,
I have copies.
do you have them?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. And of course, many of them are duplicative, so we're going to ask, or that's their job, to present us with a representative question. Another question? Yes.
When the candidates answer the question, will they stand up because I can't see them?
Do you mind standing when you answer? And projecting? I do wish I had the McLean Civic Association microphone voice. My goodness, he doesn't need a microphone. Are we ready? All right. I'd like to introduce first Mr. Chris Rasaki.
Like many children in Fairfax County, I grew up in a single-parent home. My mom had passed away when I was young. But thanks to my dad, caring teachers, and mentors, I was the first in my family to graduate from undergrad, and I went on to earn my MBA at Virginia Tech. Because of the wonderful influences I've had in my life, I've been particularly sensitive to those teachers and educational mentors and their impact in preparing students for higher education and really real life. Also, in part because of I was helped to be well prepared. I'm a proud veteran of the United States Coast Guard, and today I work in the national security field. For 12 years, I've lived in Northern Virginia, and I've served on 3 committees with the Fairfax County School Board, including the Superintendent's Business Advisory Council, the School Bonds Committee, as well as the Adult Education Advisory Committee. Every year, our school faces a $60 to $100 million budget gap. My business experience would bring needed discipline and accountability to a board that every year leads us into a crisis to close this budget gap that we face, and this is no way to do business. In part because constant budget crises impact the quality of education and introduce risks to the quality of education that we as a county are able to provide our students. And of paramount importance is our ability to attract and retain great teachers, as well as ensure that we provide smaller class sizes so that students can learn and teachers can teach. Now, this is supposed to be a nonpartisan position, but the truth of the matter is it has been run in a very partisan way. And the reality is that for the last 2 decades or more, the Democrats have had control of the board. And today they currently occupy 9 of 12 seats. And I would point out to you that the school board strategic plan says, to quote, being responsible stewards of the public's investment is their mission statement. And they have, well, thank you.
Mr. Casati will have the opportunity to expand on those thoughts during the question.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Louder.
Louder.
Louder. All right. Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
I'm Karen Keys Gamara, and I am the Democrat endorsed candidate for school board. I want to first thank the organizers, the League of Women Voters, and all the other, I think the PTA and the Plain Business Association, and most of all, each and every one of you. So I want to acknowledge the obvious, first of all. It is hot in here. And so I may need to take my jacket off, but I thought, just for starters, we'd be proper. Okay. Next, I'm going to, I may pull out my fan later, but in any case, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am the Democrat endorsed. I am also endorsed by the Fairfax Education Association, as well as the Fairfax County Federation of Teachers. I work as an attorney, and I am often appointed as a guardian ad litem to represent the best interests of children in court on abuse, neglect, custody, visitation, discipline, and oftentimes special education matters. I am also on the Planning Commission in Fairfax County, and I sit on the Schools Committee, where we plan for future educational sites. And I've also previously been appointed to the Fairfax County Schools Budget Committee. I am an experienced candidate with a demonstrated commitment to improving the lives of children and families in Fairfax County. And I have worked for many years to work out educational solutions for our kids. I also am privileged to have represented nearly 400 children in Northern Virginia, many of whom have attended Fairfax County Public Schools, and I'm most proud of my own 3 kids who have gone to Fairfax County Public Schools. So I thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to discussing issues that impact our community. Let's get this started.
Sit on your You guys are gonna get yelled at.
So when I stand up, everybody can see me,
This is
right?
Ms. Michael Owens.
My name is Michael Owens, and I am an FCPS mom. I am not a captain of industry, and I'm not a lawyer. I am a former FCPS teacher. I've been a homeowner in Fairfax County for almost 20 years, and I have a master's degree in education, and I think education is really, really important. I am highly invested in FCPS. I have an incoming very quickly a 5th grader at Belvedere Elementary School, where I am also the president of the PTA. I have been on the PTA in every school that my daughter has attended. I have volunteered to help make her school better, and I consider this stepping up to make all of our schools better. I think education in Fairfax County is one of our greatest resources. We have a tradition of excellence here that we need to take care of. We need to make sure that we give it the love and the care and the feeding that it deserves so that we can continue that. It behooves everyone in our community when we can provide a great education for all of our students. My colleagues are endorsed by the political parties. I am not. I am an independent, nonpartisan candidate, and I hope that I can bring some independent, nonpartisan facilitation to the school board discussion. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you all three. First question, and we'll begin with Mr. Casal. 3 years ago, the board voted to implement later high school start times. At that time, the board promised to continue to improve middle school start times. How would you support that goal and expedite its achievement?
So start times matter to the overall health of a student, right? Sleep is really important. Kids tend to, just due to their own circadian rhythm, tend to fall asleep later. And so it's important to accommodate later start times. So recognizing that, I would absolutely support finding ways in order to allow middle school students to be able to start later. And there are a number of strategies that we can pursue that don't necessarily need to break the bank or increase the budget. And so I think that's important for us to consider and sooner than later.
Thank you, Mr. Casal. Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Healthy, rested children do better in school. I fully supported the change of start times. I testified at the Fairfax County School Board prior to their previous vote for high school change times. And I also support addressing the middle school children. I have talked to parents who are a little bothered by the fact that their middle school children are up so early, and I know that that's very difficult. I went through it. I stood at the bus stop with my children in the dark. And I also had 3 children in high school, particularly, who were rather crafty at not getting out of bed. So I understand how important this is because our kids need the best opportunity to do well. And quite frankly, Fairfax County is one of the last counties in Northern Virginia to do this. So we do need to implement it. We recognize this is a science-based decision. We need to look at cost-saving measures on how best to do it. And I'm looking forward to working with the school board to try to get that done with bus routes and all of the complications that are involved. It really is going to involve a collaboration of everyone, but I believe I'm ready for the task. Thank you.
And Ms. Owens.
I think everyone does agree that the school times for middle school are way too early. They're too early for anyone. But I don't think that this is a high priority for us. We have really important things that we need to fund in our school system right now. And we know from the high school transition that this was really expensive. This was an expensive endeavor. So I think part of the responsibility of serving on the school board is making those hard decisions and saying, yes, this is something that we should do, but it's not a priority right now. We have other priorities that are more important. And I'm sure you guys know what some of those priorities are. You know, teacher salaries, classroom sizes, there are so many other things that affect children's learning. Also, I'm a morning person, so this doesn't hit home for me as it does for other kids. I know that they can get out of bed. I got my kid out of bed at 4 o'clock this morning so that we could go fly a dog to Utah. So I think that this is important, but it's not more important than the other things that we need to work on. Thank you.
Question number 2. Fairfax County has critical school and non-school needs, but it also has finite financial resources. As a school board member, what steps would you advocate to examine and prioritize school requirements, given these finite resources? Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
First of all, I have a couple of principles that are very important to me. First is fiscal responsibility and transparency. We have to make sure that we are making decisions that make sense. We have to be smart about our investments. And we also need to make sure that we're involving the community in those decisions. As a planning commissioner, I have really marveled at the way that they have kind of gotten that notice and opportunity to participate, having a meaningful participation in the process really down. And I'd like to make sure that however we address this, that the community is a vital part. Next, I'd like to make sure that we're listening to our staff members with respect to what is working in our schools and what isn't working. I want to involve everyone in the process because quite frankly, our budget is a moral document and we want to make sure that everyone's opinion and everyone's voice is heard in the process of determining how we set our priorities. Thank you.
And Ms. Owens.
I agree, our budget is a moral document, and we need to make those decisions not as a business, but we need to make those decisions as parents and teachers and students. Everyone in our educational community needs to make these decisions, and we need to prioritize, because we can't have everything. We need to make hard choices, and, I alluded before, I volunteer, I run a dog rescue, and I have been on dog rescues before where business people have been brought onto the board to try and help them, be practical and make hard decisions. And it doesn't work because business people find the decisions that we make insane. We're investing in children that will not show a return on their investment for 20, 30, 40 years. We're investing in the future of our community. There's no hard immediate return. We need to make decisions as parents do, and we need to make decisions as teachers do. There's no teacher that is getting rich off of being in the classroom. They've dedicated their lives to educating their children in our community. Thank you.
Mr. Casella.
It's essential that we are smart and smarter with our finite resources. And I think there are three things that we can do. One is ensuring that we're conducting independent program evaluations. The school board recently brought on a new independent auditor, and we need to use that function in order to understand what's working and what's not. Second, and I'd recommend not plugging it in just yet, zero-based budgeting. We need to develop a culture of conservativeness, of savings. And so every year, we need to check to say, hey, given our requirements and resourcing them, and given our discretionary funding that we have, ensuring that we're first prioritizing resources to those requirements first. And then lastly, it is essential that I believe that we do a management audit. The school has gained bureaucratically, and I think we need to understand whether or not we're organized optimally to best support teachers. And I think with the three of those, we will be in a better position to make informed decisions to prioritize resources to the classroom.
Thank you, Mr. Casella. In the audience, we have a number of high school students, and one of them has submitted this question, touching on priorities. I'm a student at Oakland High School. Last school year, most of my classes, my teachers were short on supplies, which did interfere with their lessons. Last year in classes, many teachers did not have adequate supplies, and that interfered with the conduct of the lesson. What will you do to make this a priority and ensure that classroom teachers have what they need on the line?
So I'm very disturbed to hear that because as a member of the PTA, as the president of the PTA, one of the things that the PTA does is support teachers when they need supplies. And when we are in a budget crunch, when we don't have enough money to support all of our programs and pay our teachers, that's where the extra money comes from. The PTA steps up, the community steps up to make sure that our children have what they need in the classroom. I have gone out to businesses and I have panhandled basically with my hat in my hand and said, this is what we need for the school. This is what we need for the children in our community. And more often than not, I have gotten that. And I think on a larger scale, that's what we're going to need to do in the coming years. We are going to need to look to the community to supplement our budget. We don't have enough money, and we're not going to get more money. Obviously, this is not a political climate that prioritizes education generally. If we want our children to have a great education, we are going to have to step up and make that happen.
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I'd say given that 53% of our county's budget is invested in our school system, it is an absolute priority for our community, and we put our money there. I think, again, independent program evaluations, zero-based budgeting, and management audit will position us to make informed business decisions to not only address the low-hanging fruit of making sure that teachers get their basic resources, but there are other very serious things before us. Teacher salary and total compensation and class size. So it's essential that we do those three things. You'll probably hear me say it again and again this evening, but it is essential.
Thank you. And Ms. Keys, come on.
I would like to say thank you to whoever brought the cold water.
Before I address that particular.
Be louder.
Okay. Oh my goodness. My kids do not think I'm quiet, okay? All right.
Testing, can you hear me?
Whatever.
I'll bring it up and we'll pass it. Maybe not.
Okay, is this better? All right, before I answer that very important question, I just have to respond to the reference to zero-based budgeting. It sounds good, but it is a bureaucratic nightmare. Essentially what it means is that you don't have funding for the next budget year until you prove that you need it. Imagine being in your home every month or every year having to figure out, well, I don't get groceries until I write out of whatever to prove that. I mean, I cannot imagine putting on a greater burden on our staff. One of my priorities is removing some of the administrative burden. We have already released some of our administrative employees, and we cannot do that kind of evaluation every year. And so we need to get, while we do need to do line item, we perhaps can do it over a 4 or 5 year period, but I do not believe that it is sustainable to do that kind of evaluation on a yearly basis. With respect to supplies, I certainly want to make sure that our children have what they need. They need a good night's sleep, they need their supplies, and they need to be able to have a good meal. Those are basics. And so I'd like to collaborate with the community. I'd like to improve communication so that we can get that done. Thank you.
Considering the increased racial tensions due to recent events in Charlottesville, how will you enforce non-discriminative policies in Fairfax County Public Schools?
You know, all of us actually do zero-based budgeting. We all have to work within and live within a constrained budget. And to think otherwise, I don't know, you know, the thing is I would say that if you don't do it, it's not sustainable. That's how you run into debt. And in fact, that's how you end up with $60 to $100 million budget deficits or budget gaps each year. So maybe it's, anyways, in terms of, you know, look, the school system must provide a safe and welcoming environment for all students. And so we must enforce that. We need decency, we need civility and respect. And so I think enforcing our existing regulations and just promoting common decency, I think will ensure that.
Every child deserves to learn in a respectful environment. And we start by setting good policy at the top. One of the initiatives that I have advocated for is a bullying leadership initiative, which would essentially train our students on how to treat one another. Rather than allowing a vacuum to exist, which I have noticed as a guardian ad litem, I have represented children who have been the perpetrators of bullying as well as the victims. And we really do have a misunderstanding in our culture because we see negative behavior that perhaps seems to be rewarded at the top at times. And so I'd like to train our children to be leaders, to welcome new students, to recognize people who come into the schools. And I'd also like to work with our staff members and making sure that they understand exactly some of the cultures. And also, one more thing, we need to embrace our diversity. It is an asset. We can learn so much from people from other cultures we have more than 100 cultures represented in our schools. And so those are just a few of my ideas, but the basic thing is to teach respect of everyone and to understand that the person next to me simply wants to be treated the same way that you want to be treated.
Yeah.
One of the programs that I have proposed is an ally training course for both the children and the adults in our educational community. And this is similar to what you've seen out in the community at large, because of course our school is a microcosm of our general community. Being an ally is not something that comes naturally to everyone. It's not instinctive. People need to know, how do you confront bullying and discrimination when you see it in a peaceful but firm way? And I think that that is really a gap. We can have policies, but if we don't tell kids exactly what to do, this is what you say, this is who you say it to, this is where you stand, this is how you stand. Very concrete guidelines, what to do when you see bullying. It's really hard for them to implement it. This is not something that kids are just going to do on their own. We need to guide them through how to do it. And it needs to be done. This is something that has gotten worse and worse over the past year. And unfortunately, what I see are different groups that they are doing this independently, and they don't recognize that the people who are bullying them because of their religion are the same people who are bullying these kids because of their gender identity. They're bullying this kid because they think they're fat. They're bullying that kid because of their country of origin. The problem is not with our kids. The problem is with the abusers. It is a flaw in them, and it needs to be confronted, and it needs to be done in a peaceful but firm way.
We'll begin with Ms. Keys-Gamarra. How should schools measure teacher performance? And would you indicate some specific criteria that you think are appropriate?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that we do need accountability measures. We have typically tried to rely on SOLs, which I think is not the best measure. I have had children explain to me how they've had to spend perhaps a month or a month and a half in their schools trying to make sure that their school is accredited, and they spend a month or so studying to make sure they do well on the SOL. Anytime we have a test that takes away the focus of education, we have a problem. So with respect to working with our teachers, I would like to make sure that we're looking at things like, how are children faring in terms of their critical thinking skills? How are children improving from where they were? How are children and parents able to communicate? And I'd like to also sit with the staff members and help them to develop some of these criteria, because I really do believe that there is so much more to education than just passing a test. Thank you.
I I think that SOLs are a huge distraction. I've been a teacher. I've seen the time that it takes out of our educational curriculum that is limited to begin with. There is a point in the year at which teaching stops and you just start getting ready for SOLs. And that's a huge problem. We do need quantitative assessments. You know, I understand principals need those numbers, but it needs to be done in a way that doesn't completely disrupt our educational process. And it needs to be done in cooperation with qualitative assessments. When, you know, talking about, you know, being out in business and using some of the lessons that we've learned in commercial environments, you know, you don't necessarily have these, you know, numbers to judge your employees by. You have to talk to them. If you're in customer service, you have to talk to their customers, you have to talk to their clients. I think that there are problems in the way that we're assessing teachers, and we need to look at how other positions in the community are assessed to maybe get some creative ideas. I know that merit-based assessments have been tried in the past and have failed, but there were different reasons why they failed. I would really like to see us try a merit-based assessment program again, one that's fully funded and has at least the potential for success.
I agree. Quantitative data only provides part of the picture, and it's important to have a qualitative understanding. You know, to kind of help give you a sense of this, if the top-down approach, the quantitative SOLs, if a student goes into 9th grade and reads at the 5th grade reading level, and that's what they're assessed at the beginning of the year, and then at the end of the year, they're assessed at reading at the 8th grade reading level, well, if that top-down approach, that student would be assessed as still failing, and that teacher would not get credit for having 3 years of academic growth in a single year. So we need to get that qualitative picture, and I think that's where the focus is, student growth. And I should add, on the previous point, you know, teachers are initiative weary. 90% of Fairfax County school budget is focused and pays for people, human resources. That's what's intense. So when you hear a new initiative, that is more money. If you want to address behavior problems, yes, you're right. You have to set the tone at the top. And the school board sets an example, and they can choose to either set a good example, such as being inclusive of the community and letting their voice be heard, or not. You know, the school board led the effort that effectively divided Jeb Stuart community unnecessarily, and that's not right. That's not good for our community. And as we look forward to how we are going to consider the name changes for other schools, we need to keep civility and inclusivity in mind.
Budget shortfalls. Some Fairfax County academic and enrichment programs have been targeted as budget cuts.
Use the mic.
At the same time, Fairfax County is spending a great deal of money on social ideology initiatives, such as enforcing gender identity policy, adding controversial sex education to the FLE curriculum, and renaming Jeb Stuart High School. If you are elected, how will you prioritize limited, valuable school resources between keeping or strengthening academic and enrichment programs and promoting social ideology initiatives?
So I think that we need to prioritize where we get our highest return on investment. Some of our programs that are not fully funded, like pre-K, there's no excuse not to offer pre-K to every child in Fairfax County. We know that kids that are offered pre-K, that are in school earlier, do better, and that is a benefit that we see not just through elementary school, but into their middle school and high school years. But I don't agree with characterizing, you know, some of the ideological programs as not a priority, because I think that it is a priority that our students feel safe in our schools. When we're talking about discrimination and bullying in the school, we're talking about our kids not feeling safe. If the child doesn't feel safe, they can't learn. They need to be able to not just digest, not just memorize what they're being told. They need to be able to synthesize that learning and be able to turn it into something new. They need to be able to express themselves. If a child doesn't feel comfortable in their classroom, they're not going to be able to express themselves. The purpose of the gender identity and sexual orientation and non-traditional family education is to help students understand each other better so that they have a more open, more welcoming learning environment, which should be a top priority.
It does come down to priorities, and certainly there is a legitimate need for understanding family life education insofar as it means reproductive systems in your body. And there's it's optional, but there's a wide variety of approaches that we could take, providing opt-in rather than opt-out. That's not really going to save you money. I think when it comes to name changes, certainly that, especially if you multiply that by the 31 schools in the school system that may encounter a name change, it's something that we as a community need to decide together on whether or not that's something we want to resource or not. So again, it's all about priorities. I don't want to prejudice a decision one way or the other. So long as we are civil and engaged and inclusive, I think we can come to a pragmatic and common sense solution that works for all of us and that we can all be a part of and proud of.
I should say that I believe creating a safe and respectful environment in which our children learn is a priority. And when I think about some of the things that we have seen in the last few weeks, the horror of looking at Charlottesville and recognizing some of the things that we've had to watch, and when realizing that some of our very democratic principles were being clashed. And I think about the name change. I think about the fact that students brought that forward and that they questioned why that Confederate's name was on that school and that name was put there in defiance of change. I applaud their efforts. I think that they represent the portrait of a graduate, and I think that we should have these discussions. We're going to have hard discussions. And so I think that we need to work together. I look forward to having discussions like the one that I was able to have with a lady who absolutely disagreed with the name change, but after we had a full discussion, she actually saw my point. And so I think that we have a lot of work to do, we have a lot of collaboration to do and communication, but we can do it, and I'm ready for that task. So I think that we do have to work on what our priorities are. We need to talk to one another, but we cannot shy away from the hard things. Thank you.
I am a slow learner. But I learn.
I am a student journalist at McLean High School. In the most recent Fairfax County Public School budget passed in May, the board agreed to implement an annual $50 activity fee for all high school students who participate in one or more extracurricular activities. Do you support the implementation of this difficult fee on students broadening their horizons? And if not, how do you propose to make up the funds this fee would raise?
Well, I'd rather us not do charge fees, but in the absence of doing zero-based budgeting, independent program evaluations, and a management audit, if that's where the resources are, if that's where we are budget-wise, we have to figure out a way to bridge the gap. So, for a lot of families, though, $50 is a lot. And so I think we need to be absolutely sensitive to that. So again, I tie it back. I think we need to be wiser with how we're investing our money and then prioritize how to move forward with that. On the name change, I think one of the unfair or overlooked elements of this whole thing is when people think, alumni and students at Jeff Stewart, when they think about the name, they're not necessarily thinking about the Confederate soldier. They're thinking about their friends, their experiences, the community around them, and that should not be underappreciated. The neighborhood around every single school matters, and it's essential to nurture that fabric. You want people to be invested in the schools, or in their schools. You want them to be attending the games and donating to the boosters. So when you pull the name, and especially if you frame it as, hey, you're a bigot if you don't like it, that tears the community apart unnecessarily. So again, we need to be appreciative that there are a lot of different ways to look at that, and we should be moving forward together as a community when we consider these things.
I'm glad you brought Jeb Stewart back up. Because the conversations I've been able to have in the community were not accusatory, they were not hostile, they were not in any way disrespectful, or no one walked away offended. As a matter of fact, that conversation ended in a hug because we had an opportunity to grow as members of the community. And I think that we should be willing to have those discussions. And it doesn't mean that we're calling anybody names, or we just need to really come together and move forward, because there's been so much ugly in our past, and I think Charlottesville really exemplifies that point very well. Now, with respect to the $50 activity fee, I hate to see that happen. I know that that was discussed when my children were in high school, and I know that for some people that can be burdensome. So I would like to work with members in the community, corporations, and try to develop a fund to try to help students in much way that we do free and reduced lunch or things of that nature, and kind of talk about how we can help kids, because I know that if I did not have sports for my children, I am pretty sure somebody would have needed medication. So I just really would like to find a way to make sure that every child can participate, but that we don't find that $50 fee to be prohibitive for anybody, because we just, it's so positive, such a positive experience. Thank you.
I apologize for interrupting, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm so sick of hearing about Jeb Stewart, guys. We need to move on. The biggest problem with the whole Jeb Stewart thing is that it went on so long, and people got so angry on both sides. I really wish that the school board would have made their decision quickly, and we could have moved on from it. This Jeb Stewart was not an appropriate name in 1958, and they knew it, and it's not an appropriate name today. And yes, there are a lot of emotions tied with that being the name of the school for so long, but we need to move past that. That is not who we are as a community today. It's definitely not who we want to be. Regarding the $50 activity fee, no, I don't think we should have a $50 activity fee, but I understand that sometimes it's going to be necessary. We have limited resources, and if it comes down to a curriculum project versus the activity fee for extracurricular activities, then yes, we're going to have an activity fee. And again, this is where the PTA steps in. And just like the PTA has scholarships so the kids can go on their field trips, and the PTA has, gives kids supplies when they need them, the PTA needs to help kids with that activity fee. We're really good at fundraising. Come to us, we can help. We go out there, we do the restaurant nights, and we do all kinds of high-carb foods, and we're really good at raising money. That's what we're here for, to support those kids.
The school board's legislative package includes the request that local school boards be given separate taxing authority. What is your position on this issue?
The issue here is diversifying funding for our schools. As you all know, our school system is supported largely by real estate assessments. And quite frankly, in the recession, those funds went down. At the same time, funds from the state went down. And so it has increased the number of shortfalls, and it may look, and people have said that it looks as though perhaps there's been fiscal irresponsibility, but I'm not sure that that's the case. We are simply in a situation that is difficult. With respect to taxing authority, what I say about that is not a part of my platform, but I do understand that we have a body of people who work on the school board, and they are the experts with respect to education. yet they have no say-so other than a recommendation with respect to how they get money. We have a disconnect, and we really have to work on how we get our funding. One of the problems we have is the local composite index, where we send so much money to Richmond, and the percentage coming back is just really insulting. And so that also contributes to our shortfall. So we've got some legislative things to work on. I don't think taxing authority is anything we're going to achieve anytime soon, but I do think that we need to understand what the budgetary problems are. I would also like to work on looking at some of our areas of poverty so that we can get proper funding for those areas. Thank you.
No, I do not support independent taxing authority for the school board. I'm coming to this as a volunteer. You know, we come with the resources that we are given, and we go out to the community to ask for more. This is not something that, as a member of the school board, I would seek to have, or that I would promote us having. I think that, yes, we have a lot of challenges, and we are going to have to find creative solutions for them. I don't think that raising taxes independently is a good solution. I'm not a politician, and I don't want to tax anybody.
Yeah, definitely localizing tax authority to the school board, I think, is the wrong direction. I know that Ms. Mara has said publicly that she, at least in the past, has stated that she supported that. You know, it's interesting. So since 2000, the school board's budget has increased by 100%, over 100%. And you say to yourself, well, you know, how much has student population increased? Well, 23%. You say, oh, well,